Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. As always, it is an honor to get to hang out with you and really talk about life, love, leadership, the things that make life worth living. And we've been talking the last few episodes about health. And today we're going to talk about mental health. We hear a lot about it in all capacities of life. And it does have a tremendous impact, not only on our own lives, but on the people that we love and do life with. And so my special guests today are Julianna and Dr. Gordon. It is good to have both of you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, first of all, we'll start just by kind of introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, your family, and what you do. So we'll start with you, Julianna.
All right. So I am Julianna Guevara, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and I am with Sheridan House Family Ministries. I've been there for 15 years. Sounds weird saying that. And I am a wife as well of 15 years, and I have a miracle daughter who is about to be 7, and she's amazing. So when I'm not filling the roles of wife and mom, I am a counselor at Sheridan House, yeah.
So before we get started, tell us what you say, miracle daughter. Tell us a little bit what the miracle aspect is. I mean, all children are a miracle, of course, but I figure there's a story there.
Yes. So in a nutshell, we tried for almost 5 years to get pregnant. Went through infertility treatments. They didn't work. And then we got pregnant supernaturally. And at 23 weeks, I found out that I had leukemia. And so she went through 2 rounds of chemo with me and fought leukemia. And then she was born healthy, full head of hair. I had none. And the doctor's like, it didn't touch her. So she's good.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Defied the odds.
That's incredible.
Great story.
I'm Dr. Secquay Gordon. I'm an immigrant from Jamaica. I came here in '98. Currently, I work with professional athletes, and I work with addiction primarily. And a little bit about my family. I have 2 daughters. I love them. It's my heart in human form, basically. And I've always known that I wanted to be a dad, and so to be experiencing it, it's pretty cool. And then my wife is I call her my ride or die, right? But yeah, we balance each other. I'm typically reserved, and she's a firecracker, so we balance each other. And if it's not for her, I wouldn't have experienced some of the things culturally that I've experienced, like traveling and trying different foods and so forth, because that just wasn't my personality. So
More of a homebody.
yeah, more of a homebody, behind the scenes, just really relaxed. And yeah, so that's my little family, and I'm enjoying them.
Now, when you say 2 daughters, is one older than the other, or what's it?
Twin daughters, and I'm having a good time. I'm learning a lot, because I'm learning that they're twins, but they're not the same people. How we approach them is different, so that's pretty cool to work through the nuances of that.
Yeah, I imagine it's interesting too when you see we have 3 children, and so you see the different personalities, but they also look different. So it'd be interesting to see the same person, but different personalities.
It's funny, one is personality-wise like me, and one is like her mom. They butt heads all the time, though. But one is really laid back, everything is fine type of thing, and the other one questions everything, which I love. So
I wonder if there's any truth, on the TV shows when they start turning, whatever age they start dating and all of that stuff. I wonder if they'll play any of those tricks on you guys, the person that they.
I actually hope so. I want them to enjoy their lives. So, yeah, I want them to, do all of that.
So it's cool how we all have these unique stories. And so tell us a little bit about, you guys some of the things maybe overlap a little bit, but you've also pursued different aspects of mental health. So tell us, how did you get interested in it? What happened that caused you to begin to pursue in that direction?
All right. well, in another nutshell, I'm going to go just briefly my testimony. So I went through sexual abuse, repeated sexual abuse when I was younger by two family members from the ages of 4 to 8. And at 8, I was able to tell my parents what was going on, and they put me into therapy. And through that experience, I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. Like, I get to express myself. I'm saying things that I couldn't say to anybody else because they might look at me funny. And so that was just like a really healing experience for me. And then at 10 years old, I was in a Sunday school class, and they gave little scenarios to different groups, and they had to act them out. And a group of boys got the scenario of your babysitter's touching you in inappropriate places. What do you do? And they got up there, and they're cracking up. They couldn't do it. So I went up to the teacher, and I'm like, can I say something to the class? And so I went up there, and I'm like, this isn't something that you laugh about. This happens to people that you know. This happened to me. And if it's happening to you, you need to go and tell somebody. And then I jetted out of there to the bathroom crying, and 2 little girlfriends came after me. And both of them told me, I haven't told anybody, but like, this happens to me too.
Wow.
And it was in that moment at 10 years old that the Lord's like, you're going to use this story. And so from then on, I wanted to be a therapist. I know it sounds nerdy at 10 years old, but
Wow, but the courage that it's in you to go up there and do that's incredible. And I know there's probably a lot of people thankful that, we sometimes forget how important the decisions are that we make when we're little,
Yeah. And it just illustrates that we exist in relationships. So our stories are important because we never know who's listening and who it could help. So
for sure.
in terms of me, how I got into this, so I played college soccer, and I had ambitions to be professional, like most of my teammates. That didn't work out, and I had a very difficult time with just coming to terms with what do I do now type of thing. So as usual, when things are rough or happy, I lean on my family. My mom was very instrumental in helping me through that. And I don't mean like, sit down having therapy sessions, but just creating space to just be family and to be comfortable so I could work through whatever I need to work through. So then I said, okay, I need to move on. This is not happening, so let's move on. I was interested in...
Hold on just a second. How hard a decision was that? Was that a instant, or did you wrestle?
No, I wrestled for almost a year.
Wow.
Really. Just, I couldn't even look at stuff from my teammates. It was just really difficult to come to terms with you're no longer doing this at an elite level. Because, from college, you either go professionally or you get a job type of thing. And I prided myself on, I'm ambitious and I'm going to fight. And there was just no opportunities to fight for, at least where I could find. So, yeah, I had to come to terms with that. And I like psychology in general. I contacted Nova because I played soccer there, so it's just like home. Spoke to some people, and they said to me, I know you called about psychology, but I think you might be interested in marriage and family therapy. Never heard of it. So I was like, okay, fine. They explained it to me, and it was like the perfect match. I knew instantly that that's the one, because it incorporated the family aspect. And I grew up with a strong family identity, right? Like we used to eat dinners at a dinner table. And that was kind of like a mini therapy session in itself, right? That's how you found out what's going on with your brother and your sister and your mom, and just the entire family get to sit and connect. Which, by the way, I'm kind of saddened that's not happening as much nowadays. So I think we need to bring some of that back. But that's how I got started. I merged my struggles as an athlete trying to figure things out with mental health professional. And it incorporated the family. A big part of it is we view problems systemically. So what happens to you, even though it might feel like it's only happening to you, your family is going to be impacted by it.
For sure.
That's right. So,
But we're going to get into all of that. But I wanted to just ask, I've asked really, I think every guest that we've had, the question, if we kind of think about professional athletes and let's say teen girls, although I know you both deal with more than that, But what has surprised you about not so much your profession, but just dealing with that group of people on a broad spectrum, about dealing with professional athletes or dealing with teen girls that, because we all kind of go into things sometimes thinking we know what it's going to be or who we're going to talk to or deal with. What surprised you about who it is that, at least those two groups?
So for me, I remember one of my first dealings with teenage girls was at Sheridan House in the residential program for middle school girls. And I remember having a conversation with my husband, just being shocked at the fatherless homes. I know that that was the most surprising thing for me. And dealing with these teenage girls and the issues and things that were coming up and insecurities. And so when you mentioned about the family table and having dinner together, that's something at Sheridan House that they do every single night. They have family dinner. And the girls there that were like, we just go and we eat in front of the TV or we just, eat on the go and stuff. And so the fatherless figure was so prevalent. And that I took like big note of that. I'm like, man, like the epidemic of fatherless homes in these days is shocking. And it really, really impacts our teenage girls for sure. And our teenage boys as well, but girls in particular, since that's who I work with most.
So just the number of it.
Yeah.
How
And the impact of not having that father. Yeah.
Absolutely. I actually have some experience working with teenage girls, and I'll just piggyback on that. What surprised me the most, first, I didn't want to work with teenage girls. It was a camp that I went to. And I was like, no, I don't want to work with teenagers. I don't even know why. I just didn't. But then I had to. And so what I found is that teenage girls are very misunderstood. That's what stood out to me, because they're dealing with social pressures of how they should look and act and all of that stuff. Family of origin messages of who they should be. They're trying to become adults, so they have their own opinions that clashes with the parents. And a lot of the time in that gumbo of confusion, their voice get lost. Yeah. They're seen as oppositional and all of that. So I find when parents actually listen to what they're saying without the already prepared answers, and I get it as a parent, it's frustrating at times. So I get it. So I think that was my takeaway from my experience. Just misunderstood because of the confusion for everybody, for them, right, for parents, all of that. But in terms of professional athletes, the thing that surprised me the most, I worked with some high profile ones, and you see them on TV and you have this narrative about who they are based on what you're seeing. And then they come into your office and they're just a regular dude, right? I see myself in them. I see my cousin. I see my parents, and their family system as well. So when you realize that these are just people that needs help just like anybody else, these are just people who they're stuck in whatever they're going through, and being able to help them, yeah, it's pretty rewarding. So that's a surprise, that the duality of this sort of image that we create versus the reality of who the person actually is.
How normal they actually are.
Yeah.
So how would you guys describe, like I said, we talk a lot about mental health. We hear a lot about mental health, and it can be defined as, something schizophrenic as to like the gymnast that didn't want to compete. So how would you define mental health, or we'll just start there and let you go.
Sure. For me, mental health is, I define it by body, mind, soul. And so when we are functioning in all three of those areas well, and we're growing and we're able to, get up out of bed, get to work, spend time with the family, plugged in spiritually. So for me, it's that framework of body, mind, soul. So whenever I have somebody new come in, I'm looking at all three areas and seeing which area is lacking, so that we can hone in on that area first.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I view mental health, anything that disrupts, anything that's persistent and constant that disrupts your normal life could be classified as, mental disturbance, let's say, right? Because like you said, it could go as mainstream as schizophrenia, one that's talked about all the time and so forth, and you treat. And it could be negative self-talk that's debilitating, that um, affects how you function with your family. And if that's persistent, then then that will affect your mental health. And so the range is wide, but the simplest definition I could say is anything that's impacting you to the point where you can't function in your everyday life, then you would need to see somebody like me.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking you guys we're talking about the teenage girls and family and mental health in those areas. And how old were your children again?
She's going to be 7.
7 and
5.
5. So do you wrestle when you're talking to a 13-year-old, or you're talking to a parent of a 13-year-old, and you're haven't been through that experience? Because I know as a pastor, that's always something. Now I'm older, so my kids are older, so I've been through a lot more. But I always kind of had to wrestle with that, and speak from authority of Scripture as opposed to experience. So, what confidence? Where do you get your confidence to speak hope into situations that you have yet to experience?
So I was able to kind of get my sea legs 15 years ago when I started at Shared House, and I was like 5 at the time if you're doing math. And so I was having to work with these middle school girls, and I was like, 23, I think at the time. Stop doing the math in your head. And so I had to learn how to deal with the parents and how to like have that authority. And I'm like, okay, even though I'm not a parent of a middle schooler, I was once a middle schooler. And also I studied this, I read the books and I've done the studies and I've participated in all this stuff. And so this is what statistics say. And then this is also what in practice I'm spending 5 days a week with their daughters,
Right.
and so they're going home on the weekends. And so I'm able to speak into that space of having more time with them and having that confidential talk too, to know like what's at the root of the issue, things that they're maybe not wanting to express to their parents. And so not willing and able to yet. So yeah, just coming into that space, confident and like, okay, this is what I'm here for. I'm filling this gap. You mentioned the voice of the girls, and okay, I'm here to be that voice for them and to help them communicate to their parents from another adult of like, hey, this is really what's going on and this is really affecting her. So that was really empowering. So that's how I was able to spend.
Did you have a mentor, but as far as that had some experience to be able to, hey, you're going in the right direction, be confident?
I did, yes. There were house parents. That was a team of 3. So I had some amazing house parents that I worked alongside, and I also had my mentor, my supervisor too. So yeah, we were able to coach along the way and just make sure that we were on the right track. But that's where I gained a lot of my confidence from.
Yeah. In terms of, I think a big part of therapy is just connection.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to convey whatever information you want to convey without first having trust. And so I spend maybe rapport building is always happening really, but I truly focus on that for the first maybe 3-4 sessions. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm doing other work, I'm still understanding what's happening. So whether it's teenage girls or professional athletes or addicts, we're all humans, and we're having a human experience. So it's not perfect. So being able to have space or create space for someone to be comfortable to share what's actually going on does 2 things. One, it helps the therapeutic relationship because you're truly connecting with the person, and people feel that. People feel if you care or not. And so I think that's the main thing. And then after that, once you have trust, then you could challenge people. You could say the thing that you came in with that you're so certain about, that's not so, all right? We could challenge and help guide them, help parents understand differently. But it starts from, I think the authority starts from just connection.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know too that every situation is so unique, and so you don't have to be through the same exact struggle as somebody to be able to speak into that. We know what grief is. We know what pain is. We know what suffering is. Right? We're human. Right? We know this condition, and so we're able to speak into that space and hold that space too with people that are going through traumatic experience. I do a lot with trauma. And so, yes, I have my own trauma that I have navigated through, and so I'm able to lead people through that. But just the depths of pain, and our stories are not going to be exactly the same. We're all unique. But just being able to speak with authority into those areas as well.
And that authenticity goes a long way. When you were sharing your bio, the scripture, 2 Corinthians that you shared, and just read it for those who are listening. Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us all in our trouble, so that we can then comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God, which is powerful for sure. When I first became pastor here 23 years ago, I thought, well, I'm in a different culture. I grew up in Arkansas for the most part, was born in Michigan, and had started a church there, but this was all different. So I thought, it wouldn't be bad to meet with a counselor once a year to see how I'm doing. And I'm going to share with you what I heard. So maybe what I heard is not what he said, okay? So I want to put that disclaimer out there. But we talked, through all this stuff, and he's like, it all came boiled down to his comment to me was that everybody has a secret, and how you deal with that secret is how well you're doing in the area of mental health, which was a different concept to me. Again, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I know at the moment it didn't feel like a lot of help, but I thought, oh, man, I'm talking, you're supposed to tell me something I don't know. But anyways, it is something that has stuck with me over the years. Not so much to maybe what the secret is, but how am I dealing with the areas of my life that aren't as visible? Because no matter how authentic or open you are, there's always parts of yourself you're even discovering maybe to how important is vulnerability and self-awareness in mental health.
Yeah. So I always start with the sessions. The first session is always gathering information, and I tell people, hey, it takes time to build trust. If you want to tell me your deepest, darkest secret today, feel free. We'll get work done faster, but I don't expect that either. And so yes, being vulnerable, being open is going to help the therapeutic process. And so if anybody's listening in, okay, I think I need to do this therapy thing. I think I need to test it out. Do yourself the favor. You're spending your time and your money. Be open, be honest, be vulnerable, and connection is really, really important. So yes, if you have that first session, you don't have to tell them your deepest, darkest secret in the first session, but that rapport is really important, that connection. And so it might take a session or two, and then if you still are not feeling that connection, move on to another one, because that connection is really going to be the foundation of you being able to open up and be vulnerable.
Absolutely. I find that most people don't know how to be vulnerable, right? And that could be from family of origin messages. I've worked with folks that literally never cried because the message was men don't cry, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes people literally don't know how to be vulnerable. They know how to hide it. They know how to channel their pain into work, and they become workaholics or whatever. So I find that we have to teach people that there's something behind the action. And so if somebody shows up a certain way consistently, let's say anger, for example, if they show up angry, well, they weren't just born angry and showed up. It could be trauma, it could be midlife, whatever the thing is, finding out what that is. Because usually when we look beyond the presenting issue, you'll find a source of what's really going on. And so when we get to point that out, and sometimes I have what we call it feeling wheels, men especially, we have to give this to, but it's a feeling wheel, and it works from the four major ones all the way out, the fear, anger, happiness, so forth and so forth. and they get to choose what they're feeling in the moments. And then we could talk about, family of origin stuff. Okay, I'm seeing here hurt. Whether you think that fits or not, what do you think? And then we talk about what's the story about hurt. What happens if you're hurt? Sometimes it's modeled. If I'm hurt, I lash out and I get angry and I break stuff. Well, if you see that for 15, 20 years, and that's modeled for you, chances are you'll take that up. I see two reactions to that. Either you take that up or you completely avoid conflict. And it's two extremes, right? And you can't live life. Well, you can, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
So we get to teach them there's something behind the thing that's presenting, and that thing is usually an emotion, whether we want to believe we're emotional beings or not. And then let's talk about that. How do we deal with hurt or anger or frustration or whatever the actual emotion is?
So we've got just a few moments left, and the time just flies by. But when should someone pursue help? Because I think there's still, even though we talk a lot about it, there's still, I think, a stigma and maybe even a sense of humility to admit that we need someone to walk alongside of us. So if someone's listening and they've got a teenage girl, that when do they do something?
So my advice, my prompting is always, if the level of functioning has gone down, like if they're not getting out of bed or they're not eating well or whatever, and this is a consistent thing for 2 weeks or more, you need to go and seek professional help. Also, anybody who has been through a trauma needs to seek professional help. And that could be abuse, that could be divorce. I mean, I think that we've all been through a shared trauma of the COVID lockdown too. And so there's a lot of things that come from that too. So really, a lot of people are going to benefit from having a third party speak into it. But for parents out there that are listening, or for individuals that are wondering when should I do this, I would say that 2 week mark of when your functioning has lessened and it's persistent. What do you think?
I agree with that. I also think that I would recommend for everyone to seek or speak to a therapist, not necessarily because there's a presenting issue, but you get to learn about yourself. I mean, not many people take the time to sit for an hour and talk about what's happening, right? So I would say for those with obvious expressions of something going on, I think immediately. So for example, addiction, for the person that's been afflicted by addiction, they see a change over time. So the thing that they used for fun becomes prison. And so they try to have different ways to stop that, and they fail. You need professional help at that point. For the families, they're watching their family member, their loved ones, change in front of their eyes. So the family usually tries to help in some way, and sometimes the way that they help is not helpful at all. It's actually reinforcing or enabling the behaviors. But you sympathize with the family because they love them, and so they're trying to do something. So one, I would say everyone, just for self-care, take how we do checkups every year, a physical. I would say the same. Go to a therapist, just kind of check in with yourself, take inventory to see what's bothering you, what you're happy with, how you want your life to look. I think, if we believe in God and we believe literally that his breath is in us, we're creators and we get to create our lives, whether we know that or not, the choices we make and the decisions. So if you're not taking time to take inventory to see what's going on with you, if you're not doing that on your own, so journaling or taking an hour a week to do that, then I would say do it with a professional.
So one last question here is, or maybe two if we have time, but is when you think about, I'm not asking you to throw your professional partners under the bus, but what's what's one of the benefits or some of the you guys are both Christ followers, you know what I mean? So having a Christian counselor as opposed or physician as opposed to someone who may be great at what they do, but they just don't have a Christian world view. So if someone's out there trying to determine, where to look for help, what are some of the advantages, I guess I would say, of a Christian professional?
So what I tell people is that there's a million self-help books out there, and those you will read and you can make some changes, and you're like, okay, I think this is working, but it can only take you so far. When you are seeing a Christian therapist, they are operating with the superpower of the Holy Spirit, with the conviction, with truth, with speaking to the heart of how you were created and who you are and whose you are, not based on the identity of like schizophrenia and depression and all these things, but they're speaking into you are a child of God. And there's a difference too. I think it's really important to note between biblical counseling and Christian therapy. And so biblical counseling, anybody can do biblical counseling, and that's great. If you have people in your church that are biblical counselors and they respond to situations with scripture and people pursue that, amazing. We need that. But Christian therapists are going to be licensed therapists that are Christians. And so they have their faith-based practice and worldview.
So they have both. I mean, they have the academic side of insight and knowledge along with the Christian worldview and perspective. It's in an application of that. Very, very good. And I got one question when I wrote down here that I've been thinking about, which has nothing to do with anything we've talked about, but dealing with professional athletes and dealing with the fact that they retire at a very young age and have to deal with what all that means. Is there a difference between what that 32-year-old basketball player whose career is over, is there a difference in what he or she is, especially he, I think maybe, is feeling, and the 65-year-old CEO or manager at Walmart who is now retired? But are they dealing with the same?
They're dealing with very similar things because what they're really dealing with is identity. So professional athlete, maybe since age 5, he's been playing the sport, and if he gets to a professional level, that means all through his development he's been praised, and he's been it becomes his identity. Who are you without that identity? It's a struggle. And same for let's say the Walmart manager or doctor that spent decades in a specific identity. There will be a mourning process that's needed, because you're leaving behind the day-to-day things. However, I found in working with whether it's professional athletes or a doctor or whoever, you don't have to completely abandon it. And I think people think you have to throw the other one away. You don't have to. There's plenty of things you could do. You could teach the next generation. You could volunteer times around it. You could write a book. There's a lot of things that you can do, and just helping people realize, even though that chapter is closed in terms of the day-to-day, it's still a part of your identity. So you don't have to throw it away. It's learning how to live with the pieces that you have left.
That's good and helpful, because we all go through change. So this is the last question. Are there any resources, or even if what should people do if they're out there and they're thinking, man, I could, like you said, whether it's once a year or maybe they're really having some difficulties and challenges, what would you recommend? What's their first step? What are some things they can do that could be helpful, or where do they go?
So wherever they're listening at, there's going to be local resources. And so whether that's calling a local church and saying, okay, which counseling center do you guys refer people to, getting some numbers through that, getting some numbers through your insurance company. For people who are covered, you can always call and say, hey, do you have any Christian-based therapists, anybody who's licensed there? And you can ask those questions. Some might answer and some might not, but that's okay. Just pick up the phone and call. And so those would be the two big ones. Also, if you're looking for a Christian therapist, there is the American Association of Christian Counselors. That's a huge network of Christian therapists, so you can find one through there too.
Very good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then You could Google therapists in my area.
Oh, for sure.
You could go to Psychology Today, and you'll get to choose the type of therapist you're interested in. If there's one specializing in trauma, you could filter by that. Now they have apps even that you could use to find who you need to find. So yeah, I would say first take inventory. Take a moment, put down the phone, turn off the electronics, and kind of do this on your own, not with anybody else, and just check in with yourself. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Are there things that's persistent that continues to show up? And if they are, that's something you might need to take a look at. And then you could call one of us and get some guidance in what to do with that.
Well, thank you guys so much. The time has flown by, and I know it's helpful to folks to hear from two of the best. So we appreciate your time for sure.
Well,
we thank you guys so much for being a part of the Troy Gramling podcast. I know years ago, I woke up one day with a sense of anxiety. I didn't know exactly how to deal with it and couldn't make it go away. And no matter how much I prayed or I did all the spiritual things that gave me peace in the moment, but it didn't make it dissipate or leave. And so I called one counselor. I went to that counselor or therapist. That, again, I don't know the right technology, but anyways, I went, and I wasn't too impressed or helped. And nothing again, everybody's wired different. Everybody connects with people differently, but I didn't stop there. And I think, anytime you sense something's not going the way it's supposed to go, whether it's in your mental health, whether it's in your relationship with your spouse, whether it's your walk with God, be passionate enough to pursue help, because it's out there. And whether it's a professional therapist or your spiritual life and you're dealing with a pastor or relational, whatever it is, don't settle for halfway. Don't settle for medium. Apologies to anybody who wears a medium. But go after it all the way. So thanks for tuning in. You can get it on all the streaming platforms as well as a video version right here on YouTube. We'll see you next Thursday as we continue to talk about life, love, leadership, and how to succeed. God bless.